and welcome to Fresh Ears, once again recorded at Media360 here in Brighton. I'm the founder of Fresh Air, Neil Cowling. The two-day Media360 event brought together brand leaders and agencies, and this episode features Nadine Young, the CEO of Starcom. There's a lot more audio for media agencies to work with these days, so Nadine sat down with Fresh Air's Director of Content, Michaela Hallam, to discuss how she sees brands, media and audio all coming together.
I am definitely seeing sound and audio in general becoming a sort of a bigger part of schedules. There have just been so many exciting developments over the past few years that I think especially resonate with younger audiences, especially resonate with sort of niche audiences that you can really kind of, explore different ways of targeting and different ways of bringing brand propositions to life. So absolutely, yeah.
Do you think that audio is becoming more important in people's media strategies than it has previously?
It's definitely something that's being talked about loads, isn't it? And I'm very aware that over the past couple of years it's been on really high on the agenda of lots of conferences, lots of thought pieces. So yes, I absolutely do think it's becoming more important, and we're seeing it become a bit bigger part of our schedules for sure.
I think some of the clients that you've got on your roster at the moment have a huge heritage actually in kind of sonic identities. I think of Budweiser in particular, you've got earworms in there. I was pretending to be the Budweiser frogs earlier, but I just think that it's really interesting that a lot of brands and businesses that we work with, if they're thinking about making a podcast, for example, it's the first time they've considered what they sound like as a brand. They might have thought about what they look like, what they feel like, their tone of voice kind of more generally in print or in vision, but they haven't really considered about what they sound like. Do you think that it's important for a brand to have a tone of voice in audio?
I mean, I think it's important for a brand to have a tone of voice full stop that they buy into overall, and then that can translate in different ways across different parts of the media mix. It's quite funny, actually, because we're here, it's the 20th anniversary of Media360. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, I feel like that was something that people talked about quite a lot on radio, in fact, didn't they? Sort of, how do you make the brand impact in a place that you can't see the brand? So yes. It's just audio. And there was a lot more around the jingle, the sonic, sort of sign off. And that went away for a while, but I feel like that's come back in quite a big way. So yeah, definitely something that people are exploring and thinking about more.
I think that it's you're absolutely right. It's come up kind of in the sessions that we've been having over the last couple of days. It'd be interesting to hear what other kind of takeaways you've had from the sessions that you've been at over the last couple of days.
So I've loved it. This is actually my first time at Media360. I've not been before. Very, very privileged and excited to be co-chairing the event. One of the things that I've taken away is that there's so much that's changed over the past 20 years, but there's also so much that hasn't, and that we're still having some conversations now that I remember having many, many years ago. So those conversations about, how we measure, how are we accountable, investing in brands, how important consumers are, all of those themes we've explored over the past couple of days. The things that are newer, obviously, much more talk now about data than there was when this conference sort of originally kicked off. And I think the other thing is much more talk about people and sustainability. Those weren't really conversations 20 years ago. And that's a bit embarrassing, I think, for us as an industry. Nobody was especially talking about talent. Nobody was talking about diversity. Those just weren't conversations, and that's sort of alarming, and a bit of an alarming wake-up call to all of us. I mean, I'm a huge champion of all those areas, and I think I'm really pleased to see that it now features so highly. But it's interesting that while loads changes, some stuff doesn't, and that will probably be the case looking ahead to the next 10 years as well.
And is that because nothing's changed, or because there are new challenges in those same conversations, do you think?
Well, I think there are lots of new challenges because, when you talk about brand, it's what we all do. We're all in the business of, building brands and building strong brands to allow our clients to sell products ultimately and create strong businesses. So that conversation I don't think will ever go away. But obviously the challenges in how you do that now, fragmentation of media, digital platforms, the explosion of audio, all of these sorts of trends make it hard, make you have to think about how you achieve those goals in a slightly different way. So it's the same goals. Ultimately, I think our goals as an industry haven't changed, but how we get there and how we have to navigate the changing landscape to get there is obviously going to change, but that's what makes our industry so brilliant and fascinating.
Absolutely. I mean, I was in the Diageo session this morning and hearing...
fantastic.
It was
great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And thinking, okay, so Guinness has been around for 200 plus
I know.
years.
I thought that as well. How long?
Yeah, and so there are obviously lessons to be learnt from how they've maintained themselves as a brand in all that time. And I think that, the lessons in terms of that, but also it made me start to think about how the audience and the consumer has changed over that time as well. And despite the case that the consumer has changed and people's understanding of advertising and are aware of being advertised at as well, quite specifically, but they have remained true to themselves that entire time. And how important do you think that is, to remain the same with an evolution in tandem with the changing consumer?
I mean, people talk a lot about authenticity, don't they? And I think it's important in all areas of life, within our industry and in our personal lives and everything. And clearly people who are authentic and people who are open and people who can show vulnerability are people who will attract support and people who will attract friends in our personal lives and all of that. And I don't think it's any different for brands. So brands that have stood the test of time do know at their core what they're good at. They don't try to be what they're not good at. And they also have to sort of recognise when people's needs change, how can they evolve but still stay true to their core. And yeah, Guinness is obviously an amazing example.
And just the creativity as well behind
Yes.
that brand is really, really impressive. The other thing that I've heard a lot over the last couple of days is attention as a metric. Do you think that's become one of the most important metrics that people are talking about?
So there's been lots of talk about attention in the last few years, hasn't there? And lots of work been done, lots of partners sort of springing up who are experts in the space. And I think it is becoming more important. It will become more important, because how, in a world where people have so much choice and, and are blindsided by just messages being bombarded at them all the time, how do you work out what is the right way to keep their attention? I think there are other factors that play as well. We talked a lot about trust.
Yes.
I think that's really important. And interestingly, a conversation I don't think was happening many, many years ago. So I think we've come to that because of the whole rise of fake news and all of these trends that we're aware of. But trust in media is becoming a really big talking point and is something very much for us all to consider as we start planning comms schedules and so on.
I'd like to finish with just your thoughts on what the biggest challenges for media and marketing are over the next 10 years. We've kind of reflected back on the last decade or so, but what's to come?
There are lots of challenges. For me, the number one thing is actually talent. There's a lot of talk about how we make our industry more inclusive, more diverse and more representative of the whole country and the whole communities that we serve and that we speak to. So for me, and as someone who runs an agency of 500 plus people, it's about how do we attract the right talent, how do we maintain the right talent, how do we keep them happy, how do we keep them motivated in what are undoubtedly tough times, cost of living crisis. We're all aware of how difficult everything is, and it's really tough to balance that. It's really tough to make sure that you can do absolutely always the best by your people when there's an element of commoditization, there's an element of cost cutting from marketers, from businesses. So we all have to juggle this. We all have to juggle those very real business pressures, but still find a way to put people first, because at the end of the day, without the best people and without people who are committed and who are thriving and happy, none of us has a strong business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. We've recently just won Best Place to Work in a small business category in the Times, and again, I think we've all collectively said that's probably one of the awards we're most proud of, because it couldn't. you can win the awards for the work, but the work wouldn't happen without the people.
I say that every time, and we also just placed on campaigns best places to work for large companies. I'm equally proud, and I always say to the team that it's the award that matters to me most, because it's filled out by the team. They do surveys, so it's not the sort of anything that anyone can spin in writing. It's actually the voice of the team, and that's the one that makes me most proud.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'm really aware of the time ticking, and I just want to say thank you so much again, Nadine Young, CEO of Starcom UK, for taking the time out to talk to us today at Media360.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nadine Young chatting to Fresh Air's Michaela Hallam. If you'd like to explore using audio and podcasts for your brand, you can find us at freshairproduction.co.uk. In the meantime, goodbye, and thank you very much for listening.
Fresh Air.